Okay, students, so now we've got a working damage system, we've got a working HUD, and we've got our base enemy. It's time to make some enemies that are a bit more dangerous. So I'm going to open my content drawer, and I'm going to go to my enemies folder, and I'm going to right-click and create a new blueprint class. But this time, I'm going to open the all classes at the bottom, and instead of making a pawn, I'm going to make an enemy base BP. Notice it shows up here as it's part of pawn. So notice actor inherit, or pawn inherits from actor, and enemy base inherits from pawn. We're now going to create a new class that inherits from the base enemy. So I'm going to call this enemy underscore chase 1. And I'm calling it chase 1 because perhaps we'll have different types of chase. Perhaps I'll duplicate it and make small changes to it to have different enemies I can spawn later. So I'm going to go ahead and open this guy. And I'm going to give him a different material just so I can visually keep him separate here. I'm just going to use the shelf material. It gives him sort of some cool racing stripes. And I'm going to go to the event graph, which you will notice some stuff is happening here. We have an event begin play and a parent event begin play that is called, and that are grayed out here. And we don't have all the code that came from the base enemy, but trust me when I say it is there. For example, I can right click and just type get health, and get enemy health just works because it is automatically part of this. It's not listed over here, but if we go back and look at our enemy base, it is a component of the base enemy, our enemy health and score. So the first thing is if we want to make some of these a little bit different, I'm going to pull off of our begin play and choose set enemy health. And we're going to say this guy has 3 HP. And I'm also going to set score value. And we're going to say this guy is a little more dangerous, so he is worth 20 points. So now already I've just done some quick changes to my existing enemy. Now, we want this guy to chase the player down. And one thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to make a custom event. Let's see if I can just type event and create a custom event. How about I just do it here? Custom event. There we go. Let's add a custom event. And we're going to call this guy, we're going to call this guy find player or chase player. So this is where we're going to have this. And then over here on tick, I'm going to say chase player. So each tick, it's going to chase the player. Now that's kind of bad. We're going to come back to it. But we're going to chase the player. What can we do? Well, we can AI move to. And with the pawn here, we'll get a self-reference. And then we'll get a target actor. And we'll just say get player pawn. Notice we're not getting the player character because our character is a pawn, not a character this time around because it's the spaceship. Now this guy's going to chase us. He's probably going to chase us pretty quick, except that he doesn't have any movement, so this won't work. So let's add over here. Now we can't add a character movement component because this guy is a pawn, but we can add floating pawn movement, which doesn't have quite so many things. It doesn't have walks and runs and all sorts of stuff, but it has a max speed, and it has an acceleration, and a bunch of other stuff here, and it has how well it can turn. And it can also be confined to a plane, which is useful for us because we're top down, so we can constrain to the Z plane by putting a 1 here in the plane constraint. Actually, I think I want it in the first one. Which says, hey, this is the normal coming out of your XYZ plane, and this means we can only move in X and Y, no Z movement. So, and let's go ahead and compile, and of course we will need a nav mesh here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to create, volumes, nav mesh bounds. Move it down till it interacts. And then pull it out. Okay, press P to go ahead and see what we have. That looks okay to me. I would probably move it down till it doesn't have the tops of any of these blocks. But this looks pretty good. One thing we can do in the future is we can use this nav mesh to actually spawn enemies within, so they don't spawn in weird places, but this should do here. And if I go ahead and bring in an enemy chase now, make sure that's above the ground. If I hit play, this guy should come right at me. Notice he automatically blows up on me because we spent the time to make it so that if we collide with an enemy, they damage us. He already has that code in his base enemy, right, in the base blueprint, and it has all the code about what to do when it dies and whether or not we get score. So you can see this already works. Now, one, as you can see, he's super dangerous because his default movement is very fast. His max speed is 1200 here. I'm going to drop him for now to like 800, which is still quite dangerous. And I don't want him to instantly zerg me as soon as he spawns in. I want there to be a check. So what am I going to check for? Well, let's put a branch in here so that we can have our check. And what do I want to check? I want to get actor location twice. One of us, Control-C, Control-V, and one of the get player pawn. Okay. Then I want to measure distance. So here's vector distance between where we are and where it is. And then from here, I want to say, let's say less than 1,000. Which is still pretty long distance, but now if the distance between it and me is less than 1,000, true, it's going to zerg me. False, it's not going to do anything. Also, right now, we're using chase player on tick. We're going to have, it's going to be really hard on tick to get away from this, but potentially if I like go around a corner, I want a chance to get away. So we're going to move up here to our begin play, and we're going to use a new node we haven't used before called set timer, and we can set it by event or function name, and they actually kind of do the same thing, because you can use your event as a function name. But I'm going to go ahead and say set timer by event, and well, I'd have to drag from, let's go ahead and do set timer by function name. Because I named my function here, I named that event chase player. So I can type that in here, chase player. I guess I could have dragged from this to do, if I did set timer by event, I could have dragged from this guy to here. It's the same jazz. They do the same thing. Now, the timer is this. How long is it going to wait? I'm going to say 1/8 of a second, which sounds short, but it'll feel better than tick. And then I'm going to tell it loops, just automatically. So what is this doing? This sets a new timer that waits 1/8 of a second. After 1/8 of a second, it's going to call this event, chase the player, which is going to check to see if we're close enough, and then chase us. And then when it finishes, it's going to loop again from the beginning and wait another 1/8 second. And this is going to keep doing this. And what's really nice about this is that it's not a delay, and I can have multiples of this guy. Because if we use delay, one important thing to look here, and in previous games we used delay with tick, and that only works because if you mouse over this, notice it says calling this again while counting down will be ignored. So you can't have more than one timer of a delay happening at a time. At least not in the same blueprint. Whereas I can have as many timers as I want, and I can start new ones, and even if whatever's happening down here takes longer than my loop, it'll keep starting a new one. It's also just very clean. Like, I can move this away, have this just be, this is the chase player. I could also have grabbed all of this and actually put it inside my event graph at chase player, but this works for here. I'm going to go ahead and compile. If we come over here, we can see I no longer have an enemy zerging right at me, but if I get close enough to him, there he is. And perhaps if I juke him far enough, I can get far enough away that he will stop. Let's see. There. Got far enough away that I'm more than 1,000 and he stops, and if I come close again, he will start chasing me again. All right. In our next video, we're going to start looking at having enemies shoot at us.